Nashville, the Honky Tonk Highway isn't the only place where dreams come true. Just down the road at the Superspeedway, hits of a different kind are happening.
Big crash!
There's no Taylor here, but at the Ally 400, you've got to be swift.
Nowhere for him to go.
And if the right notes are played,
Chase Elliott wins.
well, you may find yourself with a brand new guitar as well as an automatic spot in the playoffs. It's music to their ears, and ours too. A new Around the Track starts now.
The NASCAR equivalent of chart toppers and hit makers, well, that's race winners and guys who wreck in turn 4. Welcome to Nashville Week here on Around the Track. I'm Carla Gebhardt. Gabe McDonald going to be along shortly, and we've got plenty to get to this week, including a visit from America's crew chief Larry McReynolds, who has a big announcement of his own, plus the guy who announced he's got a new team. Chase Briscoe is in Garage Confidential. So why wait? Let's drop the green flag right now. And there's more than one challenge that awaits the drivers in Music City, a concrete track, which means drivers are going to be jumping over a lot of rubber, bumps, and anything else that falls onto the course. Now, turns are going to be slick and fast. Exiting out of those turns will bottleneck a bit, which means if we're getting a close race, there won't be a lot of room for any error. Expect some drivers to slide a bit, so having control of these next-gen cars at Nashville, that's key to victory.
Yeah, Nashville was, a fun racetrack, concrete. It never really feels that good to you. It's kind of like trying to get your car just to, feel the least bad that you can.
Nashville, obviously, we're not going to race in the rain. It's a completely different racetrack. It's concrete. It's a mile and a third. Races like an intermediate.
Getting down to those final, 2.5 months of, hey, it's going to get pretty dicey here with guys who are close to the cut line, guys who need to win. You kind of start seeing that develop, I feel like, within the last 2 months of the regular season.
Let's do Nashville by the numbers now. A 1.3-mile concrete oval is what awaits the athletes, which technically isn't a super speedway, but we're not going to tell them that. We're going to go 399 miles over 300 laps, and since we're returning to racing here 3 years ago, the track has produced 3 different winners. The key to winning? Starting up front. All 3 winners have started on the front row, and in 2 of those races, the winning driver has been decided by tenths of a second. Chase Elliott in 2022 by a 5th, and Ross Chastain last year by a 7th. It's time to go trackside in the Music City, and that's where we find Corey Curtis. And Corey, we were just talking about how this track has so many quirks. What's the biggest challenge that drivers might have this weekend? What do you think it's going to be?
Well, I really think the weather is going to be the biggest quirk that they're going to face this weekend, because either A, it's going to be really hot, or B, it's going to be really wet. And both of those things could be a problem. Now, as far as the heat goes, hydration could be an issue for these guys with temperatures well into the 90s and possibly over 100 degrees. And several of the drivers have said on this track with this concrete surface that the tires can get a little slick when the temperature really heats up. And of course, if it rains, that's a whole nother issue. I wouldn't be stunned on race day if we had a delay or 2.
Now, last week we had a lobster. 2 weeks ago it was a bucket of corn. 3 weeks ago it was an oversized glass of wine. And the trophies that for these drivers, they just get wilder and wilder. But this week's might be one that they actually want to hold on to. What is it?
Well, it's not edible like the other ones, I will say that. But here in Nashville, for the longest time, we've had what they call the coveted Gibson guitar, the electric guitar maker based right here in Nashville. Each driver for each race this weekend, all 3 of them, is going to get their own custom Gibson guitar trophy that's got a color scheme and a design just for each one of those races. I've covered racing here for a long time, and the drivers have always said that this is one of those prizes that they want to keep and that they want to put up and they want to have to show everybody at some point. So this is really one they want to get after. Really nice, really unique, and true to Nashville, just like some of those other, just like corn is to Iowa.
Yeah, very cool there. Now, you mentioned the weather possibly coming into play on race day. NASCAR's not going to let them use wet weather tires, though, or wet tires like we saw last weekend in Loudon. Why is that, and what are teams saying about those wet weather tires?
Well, the track here is too long, number one. It's over a mile. It's 1.33 miles. They're going to run 399 total miles with the 300 laps. So it's too long to use wet weather tires. Now, as for the performance of those tires at this point, look, everybody's excited to get more races to the finish line. That's a really good thing. As for the actual racing that goes on with them, that is still a work in progress, as you would expect whenever you take on a new technology. One of the big complaints right now is feel on the racetrack. And if you don't have a good feel for the racetrack, it's tough to have that trust, tough to find that power, and tough to find that speed to go after the checkered flag. So they need more time with those tires to build more trust and more feel with them.
Well, this man needs no introduction, but we're going to give him one anyway because we love hearing that America's crew chief is in our studio. Larry McReynolds is a living legend. And Larry, you've been on the show before from your house, but I got to say, it's a different feel to have you in studio today.
I mean, there's nothing like being in the studio. I've enjoyed doing all the hits throughout the NASCAR on Fox season, but to be able to come down here and see you in person, not through a Zoom camera, that's a lot cooler.
It is. Let's talk about the track a little bit now, though. And Nashville is kind of one of the oddball tracks out there. It's concrete, despite it being an oval, and none of the turns or the straightaways are really the same. How do you make sense of this track as a driver?
You know, Carla, I've talked to a lot of crew chiefs this week. I talked to Chris Gabehart, Denny Hamlin's crew chief, and he said it's really nothing like any other track we go to. It's a 1 1/3 track, to your point, a full concrete surface. But he said, honestly, the way they get off in the corner, it's almost got a little bit of a short track feel. They use a lot of brakes there. And then the one thing that NASCAR and the folks at Nashville Superspeedway are doing for race day is they're putting that resin all the way from the wall to the apron, every groove in the corners. And I don't know that that's going to create a lot of grip, but I think it'll help that concrete surface take the rubber quicker. And I think the more it takes the rubber, and remember, it's going to be around 90 degrees around race time, that'll help that concrete surface take rubber, and that will allow these guys to move around in 5 different grooves.
Yeah, drivers will take all the help they can get on this track. Let's talk a little bit about playoffs right now. And there is a bit of a wrench thrown in the NASCAR standings. So let's go ahead and take a look at the bubble guys first. And here are the guys who are in if the season ended today. Now, you don't see Martin Truex Jr.'s name on this. He's 11th. He's 155 points clear to the cut line, so he's pretty good. Ross Chastain, Ty Gibbs, Alex Bowman, and Chris Buescher, and now Joey Logano, with Bubba Wallace getting wrecked out late in the race on Sunday. He fell out of the top 16. Chastain and Gibbs are sitting pretty, but they've had pretty good runs all season long. So how far off is Bubba from getting back in? Well, honestly, one good run at Nashville away, right? Chase Briscoe made up a ton of ground, as we said. He's just 25 points out of a playoff spot. Kyle Busch said it himself. He's not having a good 2024, and it's left him 45 points out of the safety zone. Just last week, though, Bubba Wallace was in the final spot by 6 points. We've got 8 races to go and 6 open spots. Remember, win and you're in. Larry, a lot of big names on this kind of playoff bubble. What intrigues you most about this?
The fact that Kyle Busch is only 45 points below the cut line, Carla. In the last 4 races, he has had 3 finishes outside the top 30. It's almost like the cut line has become a hot potato. You take it. I don't want to be in. I want to be out. And it just kind of keeps moving around. But yeah, we've got 8 races. But remember this also. That's 16 stages. That's a lot of stage points that you can put in that bucket. And to me, when I see the way a lot of these guys are running that's around the cut line, if you'll just hit the ball down the middle, you don't necessarily have to win. Just good, consistent runs, score stage points, which starts with qualifying well for stage 1. I think you can point your way in. But yeah, for Kyle Busch to only be 45 points below that cut line, I know the math says there's a lot of drivers below that cut line that can point their way in, but realistically, when you get much lower than Kyle Busch, I think those drivers, even with 8 races to go, they're in a must-win situation.
Yeah, and another new winner could just throw everybody else for a
That's what happened with Austin Cindric at St. Louis. It moves that cut line like a Christmas snow globe shakes it up.
That's right. And then we get to the top of the leaderboard. We got 2 Hendrick drivers duking it out for the regular season title, Chase Elliott, Kyle Larson. They don't need the automatic bid of the regular season title, but they certainly want it, right?
Well, it's almost, when you get those 15 playoff points for winning the regular regular season, that's like winning 3 races. Honestly, if you go back to 2022, that's what let Chase Elliott, because he didn't have the greatest playoff. Yeah, he won Talladega, he had a top 5 at Bristol, but it was not a good playoff. But he was living off of those 15 playoff points that carried him all the way to the championship 4. You still have to have decent runs in the first round and the second round, but if you walk into the playoffs with those additional 15 playoff points, that's going to be huge. But when I look at Chase Elliott and Kyle Larson, it's like a tale of 2 tapes. Yeah. Kyle Larson either wins or finishes outside the top 20, but he's got those 3 wins. Chase Elliott, using the phrase again, hitting the ball right down the middle. Chase is the first driver since Ricky Rudd in 1991 in the first 18 races to have all top 20 finishes. But the good thing, he punched his ticket with that win at Texas.
Larry McReynolds, we appreciate having you on today.
No, it was a pleasure being down here.
All right, but first, one driver has a brand new home in 2025. You're about to hear from him.
And I got a text message literally as I was leaving from Christopher that said, "Chase, I'm so sorry. I really messed up. Go look at Twitter."
Christopher Bell may have spoiled the surprise, but he was able to make it right at JGR in our Garage Confidential. Our sit down with his new teammate, Chase Briscoe, is next. And NASCAR's playoff schedule is about to change. 3 tracks are out and 3 are going in for the 2025 season. Our sources and what they're saying is next on Around the Track. Here's the shakeup we've all been waiting for. Sources tell us that NASCAR is switching 3 tracks from regular season dates to playoff dates. Gateway, New Hampshire, and Darlington are going to the playoffs, while Atlanta, Watkins Glen, and Homestead, Miami are coming out and getting regular season dates. Atlanta comes out as it is now the kickoff of next year's in-season tournament, and teams that we've spoken to are pretty upset about Miami not being in the playoffs anymore. Darlington will return to its original Labor Day weekend slot. Now, it has certainly been a strange journey for Chase Briscoe, who's going to finish out under the season under the Stewart-Haas banner, but before they become a 1-car team next year. And if you know Chase's story, you know this is a long time coming. I sat down with the future of JGR's 19 in this week's Garage Confidential. This past month for you has had to have been just pretty incredible, learning about Stewart-Haas Racing closing and then making some phone calls later that week to get this opportunity in the 19 for Joe Gibbs Racing. How are you emotionally right now, just with all of the change that's happened over the last couple of weeks?
Yeah, I don't know if it's really hit me yet. It's been crazy, just the downs then ups, right? Like, it happened so fast. You know, to find out Stewart-Haas was officially shutting down, we kind of knew it was all coming, but, you know, truthfully, we didn't know at what capacity it was going to happen. So, yeah, literally within 7 days of finding out I didn't have a job, I had one. So, yeah, I don't know if it's really hit me yet, and if it'll even hit me until the off season. Once I feel like I can finally come here and hang out, then it'll probably start hitting me. You had some other teams reach out. I'm sure you were reaching out to other teams in that kind of uncertainty period. What made this the right fit for you and your family? Yeah, I think, you know, the one thing that definitely stood out was the performance side, right? Like, I feel like I can go to the first race of the year and they're going to be ready to win. You know, they're in the mix for the championship right now. And the other opportunities, you know, I felt like they could get to that, but it was going to take a couple months. You know, this one's ready day one. Just the culture, you know, how Joe is as a person, just how he leads. You know, even flying with him these last couple weeks, and I mean, he literally knows pit crew guys on my team and people at SHR, and like he's the one interviewing them and meeting them. It's just totally different than what I'm used to. How many text messages did you receive when Christopher Bell kind of spilled the beans in the press conference? It was funny. I was talking to Christopher right before he went to that press conference. I was sitting there 15, 20 minutes talking to him, and I was going to go run a sprint car race. And so in New Hampshire, we had no signal once we left the infield. And I got a text message literally as I was leaving from Christopher that said, "Chase, I'm so sorry. I really messed up. Go look at Twitter." And then I went to the sprint car race, and I had no signal from 2 p.m. till 1 a.m. So I had no idea what had happened, what was going on. And then a couple people at the sprint car race came up to me and was like, "Hey, did you see this?" And I finally saw it. But yeah, it was funny just seeing how red he actually turned. Like, he was literally as red as a dang Toyota logo. Yeah. So that was pretty funny. And just knowing how Christopher is, he gets embarrassed pretty easily. So it's funny that of all people to kind of spill the beans that it was him. Yeah, I love that they included him in your press conference this week. Not only that, but just kind of what he's meant for your career. You talked a little bit about this earlier in your presser, but he's kind of been there every step of the way for you. Yeah, he might as well be my agent at this point. I think it's funny. Yeah, like there's been 2 times now in my career where he's told me, "Hey, you need to go reach out to this guy. You know, this is an opportunity that's going to open up." And me and Christopher have known each other since we were right around 12 years old, and we used to live together for a little bit. We used to talk literally every single day, and as we've grown up and kind of going through the ranks against each other and being at separate organizations, it's been a little bit harder to have that relationship. So it'll be really cool, I think, for both of us to be able to now be teammates and help each other out.
You're obviously going to be sponsored by Bass Pro Shop moving forward into next season, which is really exciting. But there were a lot of question marks if Bass Pro would stay with JGR. What does that mean to you, the fact that they did decide to stay on with you?
Yeah, it's super special. I'm an outdoors kind of guy. I literally fish almost every single day, kind of like Martin. I hunt, and so for me, just to get to meet Johnny and JP and all the Bass Pro Shops folks was really cool. When you think about NASCAR and sponsors in NASCAR, like Bass Pro is the number one I think a lot of people think of. So to be able to carry that is going to be really special. So yeah, I think that's the cool part for me too is you get online, like you read all the stuff, right? And like everybody's like, oh, he's just going there because this sponsor's going, and like that's the farthest thing from the truth. Obviously, hopefully they can be a part of it, but like that was the one thing that really stood out about Joe and coming here was they said they would figure out how to make it work, and they just wanted me to drive their race car, and that meant a lot to me personally.
Well, we wish you all the best in the 14, the rest of the season, and the 19 going forward.
Yeah, appreciate it.
They call Chicago the second city, and some drivers are taking that to heart. We've got multiple guys driving in 2 races next week. Find out who next.
You have to have a great design, you have to use great materials, and you have to have great manufacturing.
And while we see different drivers in victory lane on Sunday, there's one team in the world of NASCAR that hasn't lost since the debut of the next-gen car. Which team is it? It's not one you think of. We'll take you there when ATT returns. Look who's pulling double duty in Chicago. Daniel Suarez will drive in the Xfinity Series street race next week. The Loop 110, he'll drive for DGM Racing in the 36 car. And last year, there were no Cup Series drivers in the Saturday version of the street course in Chicago. Ty Gibbs and John Hunter Nemechek are also expected to drive for JGR's Xfinity team next weekend, as is Kyle Larson for Junior Motorsports, a Hendrick team affiliate. And you always have to start somewhere. And while each Cup Series team has engineers that work on cars ahead of each race, the real work on each of the next-gen cars begins at Technique Chassis, located just outside Charlotte Motor Speedway. Gabe McDonald takes us inside to show us how the operation comes alive.
Step by step. Fresh off another NASCAR race weekend, the Technique Chassis crew is hard at work at their shop in Concord. The team of both man and machine working on every minute detail to build the most important piece of any motor vehicle.
Although we use robotic welding, one of the things about having a robot versus a person is that the robot doesn't care. The human cares. So to give you the highest level of workmanship, you absolutely need the skilled technicians that we have here at Technique Chassis.
And even though Technique Chassis isn't a race team, you could still say they're guaranteed to win every Cup Series race. When NASCAR debuted the next-gen car, Ronnie Johncox and his company won the bid to build the chassis for each one.
We're very proud of what we do. We have some of the best fabricators and builders in the sport. And we do win every week. That kind of makes it nice.
For the former IndyCar driver, being able to give back to motorsports is what matters most.
As a competitor, obviously, I love racing and driving the cars. Very proud to be able to give back to the sport in a different way through my manufacturing knowledge and experience in a way that I wouldn't be able to do as just a driver.
The next-gen car is now in its 3rd season of existence and has completely changed Cup Series racing as we once knew it. The main job for the Technique Chassis crew is to be as precise as possible while assisting each race team.
We want every team to have an equal opportunity to compete and win. We worked very hard in collaboration with NASCAR to make these pieces dimensionally as closely toleranced as possible so that there is no advantage really from one piece to another.
The design is just one of the key components that has made Technique Chassis an integral part of a sport that is continuing to move into the future.
To have a successful car, you have to have a great design, you have to use great materials, and you have to have great manufacturing. So we're just one of the 3 pieces of that tripod.
Thanks, Gabe. Well, no Mellon was safe at this track last year. Ross Chastain took the checkered flag en route to the playoffs. He'll drive into victory lane this year. We've got the odds next in our victory lane locks. Next week, we're hitting the streets as Around the Track emanates from the Windy City. Special guest next week, it's the man who won the inaugural street course race last season, Shane Van Gisbergen. That's next week on Around the Track. Be sure to check your local listings. And before we head to the Windy City, we have to race in Music City first, but here's the favorites to take the checkered flag in the Ally 400 according to DraftKings. Kyle Larson leads the way. Denny Hamlin is next at 11-2. Christopher Bell is third with 6-1 odds. Ross Chastain, who won last year's race, is fourth at 15-2. Chase Elliott rounds out the top 5 with 8-1 odds. And it's now time to give you our victory lane locks. And I'm thinking we're going back-to-back in victory lane. Lock it in. The Watermelon Man, I think Ross Chastain gets it done. Chastain is above the cut line right now, but a win this weekend would lock him into the playoffs. And listen, the last 3 times that he's been here, he's been in the top 5. That's going to do it for us on Around the Track. We hope you enjoy the race at Nashville.